All right, in this one, we're going to be talking about scale, weight, and hierarchy. Now, visual hierarchy is going to be very important when you are trying to influence a user to use your product or website in a very specific way. The same way that we're looking at this thing that says you will read this first, then you'll read this, then this one, and you'll read this last. Now, there might be a small percentage of people that actually read this in a slightly different order, but for the most part, if it's the biggest thing on the screen, it's going to be read first. And if it's the most visually heavy thing on the screen, it's going to be a focal point. So we can use this to our advantage when we're designing websites or interface design, specifically when we know exactly what we want someone to do. If we want someone to click a button, then it needs to be a lot heavier than the rest of the page, and it needs to stand out. That's why primary calls to action are a lot of times very contrasty colors. I want to walk through a couple of examples of scale and weight, and it's hard to create a lot of hierarchy without scale and weight, but they can kind of contribute to hierarchy in different ways. So let's take a look at some of these examples. All right, so I've got the Streamline Icons website pulled up again, and I just want to point out the scale and weight of everything on this website. Now, I know I've used this as examples for other things, but almost every example you can point out a specific thing, whether it's typography or color, or in this example, we're going to talk about the scale and the weight and the hierarchy. So right away, the largest thing and the heaviest thing on the screen in this particular screen is this headline. Hello, welcome to Streamline, the world's largest icon pack. Now, even though there's a giant smiley face icon in the background, and it is large and it does have some weight, it's not the heaviest thing. It's the largest thing, but it's not the heaviest thing. So it's not commanding as much attention as this headline. And I would say secondly is this medium-sized icon. It's got weight because it's also moving. It's got some visual weight because there's motion. And so anytime you have motion that's just on repeat, it's going to draw a lot more attention than just something sitting still. That's why if you look at sites like Product Hunt and each one of these products has their own little icon, a lot of times people are going to create a motion little thumbnail, like a little animated GIF, because people want their thing to be seen more than everything else and they want to get upvoted. It's become a common trend to have these animated thumbnails because it just simply commands more attention. So back on this website, I'm using scale and weight to kind of give this headline its kind of punch. And then if you scroll down here to the next section, you can see that I'm using scale and hierarchy in a very specific way because I want the reader to see the headline. So it's going to be larger, it's bolder, and it's heavier, not only because it's bigger and darker, but it also has a lot of negative space around it. And then secondly, the second thing I want people to read is this paragraph. So I'm scaling them intentionally in the order that I want people to read them. And then as you scroll through and you hit these larger sections, I'm trying to visually interrupt the scrolling with this giant block of background color because I really wanted to accentuate these testimonials, and that's an easy way to add a lot of weight is just giving it a reversed out background color or any other particular color. You can see on some of these color pickers, I think the black one changes. Yeah, so it's reversed out. And the same thing with this call to action. You know, there's a call to action to download these for free, and it's got a lot of visual weight compared to everything else. Even compared to this actual testimonial here, you know, this has more weight because it's slightly more important for the user to click this button than it is to read the testimonial. And then if we keep scrolling down here all the way down to the buy section, you can see that I'm bringing back in that huge headline. It's the same kind of styled headline because this is kind of the ultimate decision point. And I'm breaking the entire format with these huge color blocks that haven't been seen anywhere else on the site because I wanted the pricing section to stand out a lot differently than, any of the other sections. So now you can see there's an overall weight to the page, specifically accentuated with the pricing section. But then even within the pricing modules, I'm even making free icon pack smaller, essential pack larger, and then ultimate pack is the largest. And each one of these has its own contrasting weight for the call to action. So it's as you have the kind of like your overall page structure, visual scale, weight, and hierarchy, but then even inside of all of your modules, you have your own little self-contained hierarchy and weight that needs to kind of be thought out as you design each little section. So scale can work for your typography, for your headlines, for your paragraph, and your call to action, but to give something a lot of visual weight, a lot of times it needs to be treated differently with a big background color or a border or any other design element, or even negative space can create a lot of visual weight. All right, so let's take a look at another example. This is a website called lawsofux.com. And this is actually a great website just to check out and read through all of these different things, the Doherty threshold, usability effect with aesthetics. This is some great content. But one thing I want to point out here is it's a really good use of size and weight. You know, the entire website is kind of this dark background, but each kind of main section has a very strong background color with a big, strong graphic. And this is very clearly the main headline. And if you look on the home section, it's kind of this nice, well-weighted section of this kind of snake layout where it's kind of going from left to right. And obviously the biggest attention is put on these covers. So I'm instantly drawn to those because it has the most visual weight. And then there's a good use of scale being used here with the numbers and the learn more, because there are a lot of calls to action on this page, it could be a little bit weird to have each one be really large and really contrasty. So a lot of times if you have a website like this, you might want to tone down the calls to action because it's more of an exploration and you're not so concerned about any particular one being clicked. You just know that at any point you can click any of these big images or the buttons to go into that. So it's more of an exploratory type thing. If he was trying to sell this, maybe there's a buy now button that's even more contrasty, or if there's some other very specific reason that there needs to be a stronger call to action, then maybe that would be a color or something like that. But in this case, it's more of an exploration, kind of choose your own adventure, scroll through any of these and click any of these. But then as you go in, it's just a really good use of visual weight to kind of interrupt the experience. And all of a sudden I'm completely immersed in this particular color. The negative space usage around the title is really nice. And then a little bit smaller, but still a really nicely set kind of overview here. That's, these law, common region, and a lot of these things could be kind of boring to read a lot of text, but I think he's done a great job with pulling out like, hey, here's an overview. Elements tend to be perceived into groups if they are sharing an area with a clearly defined boundary. And then you got the key takeaways. And now he is using this reversed out contrast on this download the poster button, because this is kind of like where you would, that's the main call to action on this page. And then kind of using, a nice bit of hierarchy through all of this typography. I think he's done a pretty nice job here. So even though these are titles, they're the smallest on the page. And so he's bringing the content a little bit farther forward while keeping these headlines on these little sections small, because they don't really need to be that large. I think it's pretty common to have, secondary or even the third level of headlines to be smaller than the actual content, because it just kind of needs to serve as a small heading. And then he's doing a great job of breaking that visual plane with another block of color to take someone to the next page. I just think it's a really smart layout for a pretty fun little project, and I'll put a link to this so you can check it out. Next up, I want to look at a couple different designers on Dribbble that have a really good use of scale and hierarchy. And the way that these two designers use scale and hierarchy just add a really good flavor to the design. I like to think of scale and hierarchy as almost like a musical, like a song, you know, like if you're just listening to EDM, just like over and over and over, it can, while it may be good for a while, it's going to be a little bit boring. But if the music has these big crescendos and then it gets really soft, and then, you know, even at the beginning of this video, you saw, you will read this first, and then you'll read this next, and then this one, and then you'll read this last. If you can vary the voice and the tone, a lot of masterful speakers at conferences, they are very animated and they're moving around the stage and they're talking really loud, but then they whisper or they say something quiet. And that variety is just a little bit more captivating to listen to someone talk or to listen to a song. And so a lot of times we're trying to recreate that variety with our designs because it's just more interesting. So we can use these big headlines and then smaller pieces of text, and we can kind of really influence the energy of the design by using those tools. So first I'm going to look at Brian, what's his last name? Brian Powell. Brian Powell's Dribbble. I just think he does a really interesting job of having these big typographic kind of, you know, overly graphic design kind of posters. I think just it's really good inspiration to see some of the stuff he's working on. He does a lot of overlap things, and I just like the way he has this like nice grid. You can even see the grid of these letters like right in here. And even though there's a lot of overlapping, he's adhering to this grid, but then he's breaking out and creates a lot of visual interest with scale and hierarchy. You know, a lot of this type of design is not going to work specifically for interfaces, but it could be really nice on a marketing website or any of the sites that are going to, you know, promote a product or things like that. I think it's his work in particular just does a really good job of playing with type and hierarchy. Just kind of scroll through and see a lot of these different designs he's done here. This is a very simple example, but just a really nice clean grid with the title and then secondary. So you can easily tell, okay, this is number 1, this is number 2, and then all this stuff is number 3. And then he's even got this, if you go to this actual site, I'm pretty sure it's like a big scrolling thing in the background. So just a lot of fun. Scale. His designs in particular just have like a nice big variety to it. So it's just kind of this, there's a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and it's not just the same thing over and over and over, which can be really easy to have a very boring, monotonous design if you're not paying attention to scale and hierarchy and visual weight. Now you are restrained a little bit more with interface design, and I understand that a lot of times you need to have that restraint to have a very usable product. So it kind of depends on what the intention is of the thing you're designing for as to whether you go big and you make it really flavorful and energetic, or you're performing a very specific task and it needs to be toned down. But at least having the mindset of knowing whether you're going to put emphasis or not and being very intentional with it is kind of key to really nailing scale and weight and hierarchy. All right, so the next designer I want to show you, Ben Johnson. Ben, the same way, he does a great job of just really adding a ton of texture to his designs. He does a lot of like photo montage, collage type stuff. But you can see, I mean, giant M in the background paired with this photo and these big titles for some of this secondary stuff. This one here is kind of like a fun idea for an Audible layout. So you're just kind of playing with this idea of torn pages, kind of collaged together with a huge title. This is really neat. I like the way that he'll blow up huge pieces of text to title work, and actually it's hard to read some of this, but it does add a lot of visual interest. And this is an example from, I think, a Nixon concept he did. So he experiments a lot with scale of imagery and type and combining everything mixed with the quieter, smaller texts that kind of call out the thing that is actually on there. So again, a lot of these styles from Brian and Ben, sometimes, you know, those aren't really going to work for mobile apps or an iOS design. But if you're, if you're just designing like a big header image and you want to kind of show off a really fun thing to start with, these are great places to get inspiration, and also just a good thing to kind of always keep in mind to look at where can you vary the type. For a long time, iOS never had those big titles. And then slowly, whether it was iOS 10 or 11, I can't remember, they brought in like the big messages or inbox, and it adds a little bit more variety to the design, and it's a little bit more interesting. So I think looking for ways to do that is always a good practice, to kind of look where you can add that scale and weight to make it a little bit more visually interesting. All right, so last I want to show you again this My Monero project. I've talked about this before, but specifically in this context, I want to talk about scale and weight. So this is a cryptocurrency wallet for holding your Monero. And once you've logged into the wallet, you have the ability to create multiple wallets. So I've got spending cash wallet, savings wallet, and then each one of these, as you go into the detail, I have this huge balance shown here. And I think these are 13 digits. And I actually went through multiple designs here because I wanted to kind of really nail the difference between the two different wallets. And I also wanted to bring a little bit more visual interest in here. So if I bring this back, you can see on my wallet detail exploration page, I experimented with just bringing the wallet icon back in and adding a big number at the top. And I still think that this works. And this is another version where I've got the wallet icon and the big number. I think I also just felt that it was weird that I had this wallet icon and then this kind of wallet graphic. Actually, if you look at these two, like this is larger and it's scaled, but it's not really scaled large enough. Most of the time when you're working with scale, you need to have a big enough contrast between two elements for scale to actually work. If you have a little thing and then a little thing that's a little bit bigger, the scale is just going to be a little bit broken. So if you really want to play off a scale, you need to kind of overemphasize some certain things. And that's exactly what I did on this. So you can see that I eventually landed on this where it's like, okay, now I'm inside the wallet. I've clicked on the wallet and I've brought in this blue color that is the same as the blue wallet. And then if you clicked on the green one, you would have your green background. And then I created all these variations to make sure the colors were going to work. So these were coinciding with all the different colors of the wallets that you could actually choose. Maybe someone chose the dark colored wallet and it wasn't going to be quite as accentuated, but they would know that if they went back, it would still have that dark color. And the amount of money in your account is a lot more important than a lot of the other details. So that is why the scale is a lot larger and the visual weight is a lot heavier. Kind of the same thing with just the navigation. The selected icon is visually more heavy than the other icons. These are all a little bit more subdued. So creating visual weight is a way to show the active states, to show the most influential information for calls to action, but you have to use it carefully, because if everything is heavy, if everything's important, then that just kind of makes everything flat at a higher level. And so it just sounds, if everything's heavy and too busy, it's going to feel like the interface is screaming at you. So you have to use it with restraint and make sure you're very intentional about it. Oh, and as a very quick aside, I did want to show you something pretty cool that I discovered when I was looking at Ben Johnson's work. If you'll remember, he had a lot of kind of collage-y type things. And then I realized inside of Figma, you can actually create a mask with the type, live type. I didn't realize you could do that. So let me just show you what I mean here. So I've just typed out 2020 really big. I've decreased the line height to 70%, and I've kind of tightened up the letter spacing so it just kind of feels a little bit tighter. All right, so I'm going to hit Command / and type in Unsplash. This will give you access to really any of these plugins. Open that up, and I'm just going to paste in a photo here, choose animal, and we have this little guy. So I'm going to put it right on top, group these two things, and then I'm going to hit Control-Command-M to create a mask. You can also, let's see, where is this command? Mask, use as a mask. So under Object, use as mask, And then you can, position this photo however you want. So that's just a really cool kind of fun way that you might want to create a graphic for a website or something like that. Just wanted to throw that little trick in there that I discovered while I was preparing for this lesson. Okay, for homework, I'm gonna get you to design a movie browsing web page. So like a grid of movies, like with like the poster art. You can pick whether it's a mobile screen or a desktop app. Pick whether these are new release movies or a genre that you really like. Maybe you have a favorite actor or actress that you want to put their movies in. You make the call on that, but do like a grid of 9 and try to get a nice spacing grid system going on. Nice titles. I also want you to add like a title underneath the poster and then a little bit of metadata down below, like the release date or maybe starring so-and-so and maybe there's a small one-line description just so there's a little bit more contextual information. And then I also want you to have one of them selected with a detail view either coming in from the side or popping up in a modal or sliding out from the top, or maybe there's a secondary detail screen. You decide how you want to do the detail screen, but I want you to pay special attention for this particular lesson to the scale and the weight and the hierarchy. So on the exploration side of things, the movie posters, they're all gonna be about the same kind of size, but then the active state of the movie poster should have a little bit more weight because you need to show that it is indeed active. Whether that's background color or border, you get to decide that. And then the detail screen, if you're gonna show it on the same screen, it needs to have a lot of visual weight. And then if you're gonna show it on its own separate page, you at least need to kind of think about scale of the movie imagery. Maybe you bring in a different image from the movie, maybe you scale at the movie poster, you decide. But for this particular lesson, just really think about your scale, your weight, and your hierarchy. Post your work, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.